Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Joy Fruth, and I'm a consultant with MTM Services, and I'm here to talk about virtual same-day access. This is part one of a two-part series. I hope that each of you listening and watching are safe and healthy in these highly uncertain and very unprecedented times. As I said, this is part one of a two-part series on virtual same-day access. Now, we at MTM Services have helped hundreds of organizations to implement same-day access, but things are different now. How can we provide access during this pandemic? The challenge for many of us is that we are ordered to shelter in place, and so that means only going out for the most essential, only leaving our homes for the most essential things. Many organizations that I've talked to nationally have decided to move to a telehealth only model, which is great. It provides the opportunity to continue services, but with safe physical distance. And this is, in some providers that I've talked to, have stopped access altogether for new clients. This is somewhat typical. We see this that in a crisis, when we feel stressed, when we feel behind, oftentimes we close our front door to new clients. Right now that can present a big problem, because if we close our doors to our new clients, where will they go? Where will they go to get the support that they need? Clients who decompensate may end up in our emergency rooms, which are already strapped with and full of infectious patients. So to keep clients out of the ER, we need to try to keep our access doors open. And when I say access doors, I mean virtual and literal. Some clients, as we know, lack access to the internet or to computers or to smartphones. Their only options to seek services are going to be via in-person or telephonic access. And so we challenge organizations to keep all your doors open, to give your clients options, all doors, virtual and in-person and telephonic. So the answer to providing access during this pandemic is to take your same-day access virtual. Now, I'm assuming that many of you watching this already know what same-day access is. Maybe you're already providing same-day access, but for those that, or were providing, I should say, same-day access, but for those that may be less familiar with the concept, same-day access invites clients in on an unscheduled basis to have an assessment. And so what traditional same-day access used to look like, and I'm talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago here, was this: clients would call, we would do a screening to determine, to rule out crisis, to confirm that the service they were seeking matches a service we provide. We would find out about their insurance, and then we would give them those same-day access hours. So we might be inviting them in to our office between the hours of 11 and 3, let's say Monday through Friday, just as an example. The phone call would take about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we wouldn't do anything again until the client walked in during those open access or same-day access hours. And once they walked in, then we would start them down the pipeline, beginning initiating any administrative paperwork they would need to complete, getting signatures on consents, filling out releases of information, that sort of thing. We might be gathering information about the client and their history, health questionnaires, and on a patient portal if we had that type of technology available in our waiting room. And then the client might experience a little bit of downtime while they wait for the therapist to be available to conduct their assessment, but we tried to keep that at 30 minutes or less. Moving on, they would see the therapist for the diagnostic assessment and at least one goal, one individualized goal for the treatment plan. And lastly, as they checked out, they would stop at reception where they would be scheduled for their next service appointment, ideally within 5 to 8 days. That's traditional same-day access. That's something we might have been doing 2 or 3 weeks ago. But now many providers have moved to using or relying more heavily on telehealth because of our need to create physical distance. And so to keep providing access to new clients, you can take your same-day access virtual. By providing virtual same-day access, you give your clients more options. Now, many of you who might have been doing same-day access previously in that traditional model may have used telehealth as a backup plan. For example, when you had a client in the office but didn't have a clinician who could see them in person, you might have used telehealth to mobilize a clinician from another site to see this client who's here. That was a good backup plan. With virtual same-day access, we're talking about now making that not a backup plan, but the primary operating procedure. And in-person and telephonic visits now become the backup plan. Of course, you must operate within your state and local guidelines, and we can't know everyone who might be watching this video, so please check your state and local guidelines. I know that's a challenge right now because things seem to be changing minute by minute, but we want you to provide a good service, but also get paid for the services that you're providing, so it's important to know those state and local guidelines. So what are we talking about? What would virtual same-day access look like? Well, it looks similar at the start. It starts with a screening call where we rule out crisis. We confirm that the client's need matches the service we provide. We find out what insurance they have. And then we need to confirm what technology they have available to them. Can they participate in our virtual same-day access? Or do they lack access to technology? Will we need to conduct this telephonically? Of course, if we can get paid. Or last resort, will we need to consider in-person options? If the client has available technology, then we give them our virtual access hours and we give them the details that they'll need to log in, ideally with no password or account required. We'll talk about some of that in part 2, kind of how to design your the details of your virtual same-day access. If we must resort to in-person access, then on the phone we need to screen for symptoms and give our clients our literal walk-in hours. The phone call should take about 5 to 6 minutes. And then either the client logs in because they have the technology to do that, or they might call if telephonic assessment is how we're going to conduct this, or last resort, they might need to walk in. If they log in, ideally our telehealth platform gives us capabilities for a virtual waiting room. The client signs in, they exist in that virtual waiting room where we can interact with them intermittently. Again, that's ideal. The first step would be for our administrative staff to initiate any, confirm that the information gathered on the phone is still correct, initiate any administrative forms, business financial forms, gather information for those health questionnaires, and ideally we have a digital way to do that using maybe DocuSign for forms that require a signature, or connecting the client to our patient portal where they can enter their own information to answer those health questions, gathering health history. If the clients must be seen in person, then obviously we have to start with a symptom screening. And then we might initiate forms in the way that we did before, as long as, again, that safe distance can be maintained. So that might be using signature pads that can be cleaned between each client's use, or going back to the old school paper method, which might be safer under these circumstances. Next is the assessment. And so in our virtual same-day access, ideally our first choice is if our clients have the technology at home that they can log in. And in that case, our clinician might be visiting that client via telehealth from the office or from their home. That gives us a lot of reach to be able to provide access to clients. But of course, again, it's dependent on the client having access to that technology. So what do we do if clients don't have telehealth technology? Can the assessment be conducted by phone? That's the next best way to maintain safe physical distance. Can we get paid for an assessment that's done by phone? If not, then we might be looking at, again, other options. But you can still incorporate more telehealth. So maybe the client needs to come into the office because they don't have access to a smartphone or a computer or the internet. But that doesn't mean our clinician has to be in the office. They could be conducting the assessment from their home, working remotely. The client is in office and they're placed in an office with a telehealth setup. So that could be an option. That's a great option for clients who don't have technology at home. Another option, maybe our clinician is in the office and our client is in the office, but because our offices are so small, oftentimes provider offices don't allow for 6 feet, that safe 6-foot distance, physical distance between the clinician and the client. So we might use telehealth technology with both individuals in person in the office. The clinician in one office using the computer to see the client in another office using the computer to see the clinician. So it's almost like a telehealth phone booth where we set the client up on video to meet with their clinician for the assessment. Now, of course, in this model, you would need to, scrub down, wipe all surfaces, and clean that area between clients if you were to do that. But that is a safe way to maintain that 6-foot distance that sometimes might not be achievable in any other way. If the client must be seen in person, having no other options or having ruled out all other options, then can we maintain 6 feet of physical distance safely with the clinician and the client being together in the same office? It's still an option, could still be an option, of course, as long as safety is maintained. So in our part two of the series, we will talk about virtual same-day access, how to design it if you're not already providing same-day access perhaps. But we want to put out the call, let us know how we can help you. There are a lot of resources available at our website. You can also contact us through our website for a planning meeting if there's more that we can do. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you'll join me for virtual same-day access part 2. Thanks everyone, stay safe and stay healthy.